Matt here again. Just wanted to talk today a little bit about a coding, I guess, a tactic that I use to help me problem solve, which is just coding in English before I actually put in the code. Or it doesn't have to be English, I guess, coding in plain language. Um, and what do I mean by that? I mean, obviously, I'm not actually doing the code in plain language, but I'm laying out the code that I write using plain language before I actually get to implementing the code. So I'm just going to go through an example and talk a little bit about that and why you'd want to do that. So just as an example, maybe I want to put a lift into a game, and I want it to have a couple of buttons, one at the start point and one at the end point, and it to be able to go up an arbitrary length of time, or an arbitrary length in a set amount of time. And I want that set amount of time to be customizable from the editor. So let's go ahead and create a blueprint, and I'll say it's an actor. We'll call it a lift. All right, and so I think the first thing we'll do is we'll open it up, and we'll just put in a cube component. We'll call this lift platform because we'll need a platform. I haven't really rehearsed this, so I'm probably going to make some mistakes. I will make it flat-ish. I'm going to turn off grid locking so I can just kind of, nope, I did the wrong one. There we go. Yep, so that's the platform. And then I'm going to go ahead and create another cube. We'll call this button 1, and we don't want it to be parented to the lift platform. We want it to be attached to the root. And we'll go ahead and move it out. And for scaling for this guy, we actually do want it to be 1 in height, but we'll say 0.25 and 0.25. This will sort of just be like a little console panel that has a button. And we'll go ahead and duplicate that. We'll call it button 2. All right. So these are where you're going to walk up to, and the platform will, if you have one that's way up high like that, that's where, the platform will go up to. And then we're going to compile and save. And here's what I am going to be talking about in general, this idea of coding in plain language. I know I need to move that lift up and down when I click either of those buttons, but how does one go about putting that together? If you've been coding for a long time, then you can probably just write this straight into code. No problem. You just think about it, say, okay, well, when I click the button, I'm going to make it move over a period of time, etc., etc. But if you're just approaching code, you're new to it, or you're unfamiliar with this particular scripting language, then it can be a bit tricky to just think your way through something like this in code. So something that I find useful is to block out the different components of what's going to happen using comments, and then to fill in each of those sections. This works the same if you're writing in C++ or Java or any other coding language, but it lends itself particularly well in this because you can put comment boxes. So let's go ahead and pull some comment boxes out. So we'll say, comment click button 1. Well, that's sort of an input node, right? Like click button 1, what's going to happen? I say like click button 2. So that's going to be something else that happens. So we can go ahead and put our on clicks in there if we want. So for button 1, we'll just put on clicked. Nope, that's going to go up in button 1. And for button 2, we will do the same, unclicked. Okay. So we're going to need some things to happen, and we want to, if you click the first button, we're going to want to move it to button 2. Well, and if we think about it, actually that's not the case necessarily. If it's when we click button 1, we want to if it's at button 2, we want to bring it down to button 1. And if it's at button 1, we want to send it up to button 2. So what we want to do is start it moving from location. Okay, and that's actually going to be the same for button 2. So in this case, this it seems like it will fit nicely. It'll come from either of these. And that's our first thing that we can note here, is that we have this sort of symmetry between what we're clicking and what happens. So start moving from location. Well, within this, we can actually subdivide that down into a couple of ideas, because start moving from location, that has, like where do we start from that? So let's go ahead and put another comment in here and say if at button 1, what are we going to do? If at oh, sorry guys, I keep typing into the context prompt, right-clicking and typing. If at button 2, and I guess there's a third state, which is if we're moving in between the two, and we could delineate further. We could go moving up or moving down, but I think just for the sake of time here, we'll go if moving. So now we've got sort of our 3 states, and we need to think about what's going to happen. So if we're at button 1, then we want to, oops, I just want to click on this and then delete it. Put a comment in here. If we're at button 1, we want to move to button 2. And if it's moving, we want to say do nothing. Like, we won't put anything here necessarily, but this is just sort of our notes to ourselves. And I think that's what we should do in this case. Maybe we want to reverse direction or whatever, but whatever you're going to do here, just put it in a comment and just leave it. And then here we're going to say move to button 1. And it's not just moving to, so I think maybe we, upon thinking about it a little bit more, we say start move, because if it's not moving, you're not just going to suddenly move, you want to start move. So, okay, so now we have this sort of layout, and this layout will help us think through our problem. So if it's at button 1, then presumably it's stopped, and if it's at button 2, it's presumably stopped, and if it's moving, and that's the first thing we can note from this is, from this sort of structure that we've built here, is, oh, we need a variable for whether it's not moving or not. So let's go ahead and create a variable is moving. Okay, and this will give us our branching statements into if moving or in here. So what we can do is we can just go ahead and say get is moving if branch. We'll take a reroute node. Add a reroute node. Just this way we can say right now it's going to do nothing, but if we wanted to reverse direction, we could do that later. Right now it does nothing. If it comes into here, we will need a branch to determine whether or not we are at button 1 or at button 2. And we have to determine what this is going to be determined by, what this branch actually is reading as a Boolean. Okay, so what is this condition going to be? Well, we could do it in a few different ways. One, we could check the position relative to this. We could figure out like whatever. But in the editor, if we compile this and look at the viewport, we have this sort of structure. And if we put this out into the level, we have this sort of thing that is in the level. But thinking about it, we might want to move the height of the second button, or we might even want it to go diagonal. So maybe what we should be doing is having the first and second position be a set location, and a location in this case is just a vector. So we have button one's, we'll say station, I guess, and we'll make it a vector. We'll say this is where it's going to be if it's at button 1. I'll go ahead and duplicate that. I'll call it button 2 station. So now we've got these two variables, and what we can do is check to see whether this, we know it's not moving, so it's going to be at button 1 or button 2. So let's go ahead and just say equal to, and there's an error tolerance. So we might even want to raise the error tolerance if this seems finicky, but I think that when we're done, that it should move all the way to this location. The other thing I think we should do is, along with exposing it with that little eye there, we should give it a 3D widget. All right. And what are we comparing it with? So what we want is we want to compare the lift platform get world location. So in this case, I mean, we're just asking a question like, look, okay, what does it mean to be at button 1? And what does it mean to be at button 2? Well, what we mean is that to be at, it means just to be at the location. So let's get the location of the platform in world space and compare it to this button 1 station. And actually, this is going to be relative to the actor. So if it starts out at 0, 0, 0, the 3D widget will be centered at the scene root. So what we need to do is actually get the world location. Let's just get actor location. Get actor location, our location, plus this guy, and that will give you the final position of this, right? So this just gets added on to the actor location to determine its world location. All right, so now what we're doing is we're checking to see if it's moving, and I think what we can go ahead and do is just connect both of our clicks in here. So in both cases, no matter if you click, we're going to go ahead and check. And if you're moving, then we are going to go into this branch, and if you're not moving, if you're moving, we're not going to do anything, and if you're not moving, we're going to go into this branch. And the first thing to do is to set the variable is moving to true, because we're going to start moving. So in either case, and actually we can put that in between here. So there we go. So we're not moving, so let's start moving. Depending on where we are, we need to start our movement. So what we're going to do is figure out how we want to move. And in this case, we want to move smoothly over a period of time. We'll say a set period of time. And what we can do is just create a timeline. There we go. And there's actually transform nodes that do this for you. I'm blanking on what they are right now. I'd have to look it up. But you can actually do this without a timeline if you want. We'll just go ahead and give it a float track though. This is an easy way to do it. And we'll just say that its length is 5 seconds. Oops, I'm sorry. I always do that. And we will set it active at event begin play, just because if we don't, for whatever reason, it doesn't start playing if we say to, or at least it used to. That might have been a bug that got fixed. Active that, yes. So we have this active timeline now, timeline 0. You can rename it if you want. And on this float track, I think what we need to do is set a keyframe here and a keyframe here. And what we'll do is we'll actually set the value to 1, and 5, and 0, and 0. File save. All right. So now what we need to do is we have play and reverse, play from start and reverse from end. I think we're going to be using play from start and reverse from end. And what we need to do in the update is set the location of the platform somewhere in between 1 and 2, depending on the how far along the timeline it is. And we have this that goes from 0 to 1. So what we can do is do a lerp, a linear interpolation. We'll drive this as the alpha. Actually, we need a lerp on a vector. And we'll drive this as the alpha. And we'll take this. And we'll take this. And it's worth noting that we should be working with relative locations here, not world locations, because these are relative locations. You notice that we have to transform it to a world location if we want to use that. And for each update, we want to get this set relative location there. And let's not sweep, we'll just make it do it. I don't care if we hit anything. We don't want to teleport though, because we want to have physics interactions, etc. It's a lift after all. And that should do it, because when we get to the end of the timeline, it'll either be 0 or it'll be 1, depending on which direction we're going in it, and it will set the location. So what we need to do then is, now that we've set the moving variable, if we are at button 1, then we need to set it going in the proper direction, the forward direction. So let's get this, and we'll play from start. There we go. And if we're going the other way, then that'll be the same. Except for we're not going to play from the start, we're going to verse from end. And it's important that we can only do this if it's moving. If you were going to allow for reversals, then you might want to do just play or reverse based on which direction it's going. And you'd have to figure out which direction it's going, so we're not going to do that right now. But that will give us the basic motion. I think compile save. And if I look here, button 1 station. Oh, and the other thing is that where's button 2 station? Did it not? Button 2 station. Oh, give 3D widget. Yep, there we go. I didn't give our button 2 station a default value, so I'll give this like 100. Up, compile, save. Yeah, there we go. Button 1, button 2. So we'll set button 1 to here. Button 2. Oh, and I would have to expose the mouse to be able to click these. I think I can escape it. Oh, I can't remember what the escape button is right now. What I'll do is exit. I'll make it so that if you press F and you're in range. So in range, we'll just quickly add a volume, collision, sphere collision volume. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. Actually, we don't need that at all. We'll just say keyboard F. Yeah. Pressed. Go in here. Um, you would want to figure this out a little bit more. Like I'm approaching this column, this button or that button. But we also need to then enable input on ourselves from player controller 0. It's always 0 unless you're doing multi-local player. And now, if I play, press F, it goes to the second location. And then, I have failed to do something. It's important that when the timeline is done, it resets our moving to false. So we're no longer moving, we're at the proper position. So now if I play it, I can press F, it'll go up to the upper widget. And I press F again, it goes down to the lower widget. Okay, and that's great. One other thing that we want to do just for cleanliness here is we want to set in the construction script here, these buttons should match up with these widgets. So what we want to do is set the buttons offset from the widget a little bit. So what we'll do is the construction script, just so everybody knows, it runs when you edit an instance of the blueprint in the editor. So that means moving it around or anything like that. So if I change one of the widget locations, it should run this construction script. So we'll just set location, set relative location. We'll go ahead and get this, but I'm going to break it. And I'm going to go ahead and just, I don't know, we'll say offset plus 100 on the X. Hopefully 100's enough. I will say 200. I mean, who really cares? Make vector like this, like that. We'll hook this up, and we'll grab this whole thing, and we'll do the same for the button 2 station. That needs to be button 2. So now, hopefully, if I did that correctly, if I change this, it actually moves the column up with us so that wherever this may be, there's going to be the column, the button will go up with it. So if I wanted to have, 2 platforms, let's say this is up here like this, and I wanted to lift, then we'll go ahead and rotate it around like this, and we'll move it up like this. And now we have this nice little lift here that in game, if I play it, you can see, press F and it goes up. And press F again and it goes back down, etc., etc. And if I wanted to, if this was higher, I could always just grab this widget and raise it higher and it will work just the same. Yeah, so I mean, it would need tweaking, and you have to think about the level design, etc., etc. When you're building this, but that's the general idea. So to talk more generally about what the approach here is to comment out everything that you're going to do so that you can get a clear idea of the structure that your program is going to take. In our case, we sort of talked about the problem that we were asked to solve, and we broke that problem down into a few like plain English, in our case English, steps. We're either in this state, or we're in this state, or we're in this state. And depending on that state, we want to do one of a few different things. So we just commented all the way down. And then you just fill those in from the inside out or from the outside in, whichever makes more sense. In our case here, it was working from the outside in, putting checks down and down until we were at the innermost level, and then building the little bit. This is move platform from button, right? This is the actual operational logic. This is what actually moves the platform. And this is all just the logic around which direction and how to move the platform. So I don't know if that was helpful. I use this constantly. I very frequently will have a large piece of functionality that I'm trying to implement, many times more complicated than this. But as long as you start large enough and at a low enough level of granularity, where you're not worried about the details yet, you just say the general thing. I want to move a lift from one button to another, and start building out comments that get ever more detailed until you get to a comment that is so detailed that you know exactly what the line of code that will successfully accomplish that is. Then you can approach most any you can approach most any problem and solve it in a fairly straightforward way. I hope this was at least somewhat helpful, maybe a roundabout way of demonstrating this, but let me know if you like these sort of videos, if they make sense to you, and let me know if you don't like them and if you think I could improve these at all. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.